Stephen Dupon. I'm the manager of Manningham YMCA Youth Services, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about the gamblification of video games. Now, we've been working in the video games space for about 2 years now, ever since we released a report about the impact of video games on young people. We did that in 2012, a few years ago now. From that report, we became really excited about the opportunities that video games bring to young people, in particular in engaging disconnected young people and skill development for young people with disabilities. Now, we've moved into a phase of awareness raising, and particularly we hope to educate young people and their families about the concerns that surround video games, many of which you probably already heard about in the previous presentations. So as I said, today I'll be talking about the convergence of gambling with video games, and I'll start off with a statement saying that some video games are more addictive than Pokies. So that's really what my presentation is going to be about today. It's going to hopefully show you that certain video games, particularly the casual games that you play on mobile phones or on iPads, are more addictive than the Pokies. Now, I see that this is quite a sweeping statement, and you may or may not agree to this. So do you agree with the statement? Now, before we get into it, I quickly wanted to give an overview about the gambling in Australia and what gambling in Australia looks like these days. We know that 80% of all Australians gambled in the past year. Now, this might be an outdated stat, though, because some of the latest research would indicate that number is falling. Most recently, Sally Gainsbury from the Southern Cross University came out with a research saying it was only 62%. And I would be really interested to find out or to research whether the rise of video games has an impact or an influence on this number decreasing. The other thing we know is that on average, every Australian loses about $1,288 per year, which is a world record, and which makes the gambling industry a multi-billion-dollar industry with profits predominantly coming from the Pokies, as we know. So, you know, that's just to show that gambling is very well accepted in Australian culture. It's really a part of Australian society these days. Now, in the 90s, we saw this big development happening in IT, and the internet came over in the world and really disrupted lots of industry and also the gambling industry. Fairly quickly, one was able to access gambling websites and gamble online. And then in the early 2000s, I think 2001, we saw the Australian government regulate this online gambling, or what's often referred to as the interactive gambling. And it made certain forms of gambling legal online and others illegal. So we see sports betting and race betting and the lotteries. They're all legal forms of gambling that you can access online, as opposed to the casino-style games like poker or poker machines becoming illegal. Now, that doesn't mean that Australians can't access these overseas websites. And as a matter of fact, there are about 2,500 websites in about 70 different countries offering online gambling to the whole world. And Australians can access these websites quite easily. And it's in this space that we see some of the challenges with regulation come up, because these websites are rated by laws dependent on the tree that the website is based in. A few more of the challenges are, for example, a lot of the time you need to sign up with your credit card to these websites, which obviously opens up the possibility of fraud. And lastly, when a lot of people are accessing these websites and spending money on them, those are all Australian dollars going overseas, which is very difficult to track. And so it's very difficult to monitor the money that goes overseas. At this point, I'd like to add the issue of Bitcoin. Bitcoin being the online virtual currency, which is rapidly increasing in popularity and is not controlled by any central bank, which means that the users are anonymous as such, and making this currency quite volatile. And at the moment, there's quite a big black market, and we see governments struggling to regulate this whole world. I believe this is going to also impact or have an influence on the gambling world in ways that we don't really know yet. Then we move on to the second, in my opinion, the second big development in industry in general, and it's the mobile phones. It's the smartphone in particular that in, say, mid-2000s came on the market, and these gave us access 24/7 to websites and to a computer. This is the ultimate impersonal computing, as Steve Jobs would say. So it means that you can access these online gambling websites wherever you are, 24/7, anywhere in the world, even in bed, as the slide shows. So at this point, I'd like to ask you my second question, which is, do you take your mobile phone to bed? I have to admit, I do, and my mobile phone sleeps nicely next to me on my bedside table. And I think it would be interesting to find out if more people take their mobile to bed or not. Now, the other thing the mobile platform actually did is it really disrupted the video game space, because with the development of apps and the technology that became available, that really saw thousands and thousands of games coming up and becoming available through mobile phones. And really, you're looking at casual games and social games, so games that you can play for a quick 5 minutes whenever you're waiting for the bus, or whenever you are bored for a few minutes. So let's have a look at these apps, in particular the free-to-play gambling simulation apps. So here are a fair few examples of simulation gambling apps. And how this happened, so we see a lot of these video game developers jumping into this apps space, developing their own games, and obviously a lot of card games, for example, like poker, having games that have been around for a very long time. And so they modified these games to suit the app space. And look, in a few years, there were thousands of these games on the market. Given my next question would be for you, opening another poll here. If you have ever played these gambling apps before, give me an idea about how many people are actually know how these games work, and who doesn't. Look, quickly, how do they work? You download an app that takes you about a minute, and then it's available on your phone. With that comes a free amount of tokens or coins with which you can play immediately. Now, you may win, you may lose, depending on the game, depending on your luck, most of the times, and dependent on that, you can purchase some more coins if you need it, or if you're winning, then you can just keep playing with the coins that you have. What's important to note, and where these games are very different to real money gambling, is that these games don't offer the option of cashing out. So if you make a lot of coins, then you can't actually convert those into real money, but you can keep playing. It is because of that, really, the inability to cash out, that these games are not considered gambling. Because for gambling, you need to be able to win an amount of money. So have you played this before? I hope you're all answering those questions. Now let's have a look at what is gambling, this simulation gambling do, and how come they're so important here. First of all, this simulation gambling was seen by the gambling industry as a competitor. They thought they would take away the players, and players would choose free-to-play gambling games rather than spend their real money on it. But the industry quickly realized that that's not the case, and they also saw some incredible opportunity in these free-to-play games. And in the last few years, mainly actually last year, in 2013, we saw some very big gambling industry players buy up the most popular free-to-play simulation games. And why that is? Because they continuously make a profit. So some of the more popular free-to-play gambling games, they would make approximately between $300,000 and $400,000 per day. And these games continue to make that sort of money, whereas for other games, for example, we see them peaking and then dropping away in terms of how much money they make. Not so with the free-to-play gambling games. They continually stay profitable. The other thing is it gives the gambling industry access to a whole new pool of potential players for their real money websites or their real money businesses. You have players who get introduced to gambling through the free-to-play simulation games, and it's a really cheap marketing tool for the gambling industry to find new players. And the other reason, of course, is the profile. The gambling industry loves the fact that these free-to-play gambling games are classified as video games, and they make gambling seem harmless and just a little bit of fun. So that all of that is obviously gold to the gambling industry. Now, why is this an issue? Why are we so concerned about these free-to-play gambling games? Well, first of all, these games are as addictive than the real money version. The monetization might be different, given that you need to purchase in-app purchases, and you're unable to cash out. But what we see is that the profits they make are comparable to real money gambling. And another thing we know is that 0.15% of all players account for 50% of the revenue. So it means that a really small amount of players actually spend enormous amounts on these games. And they're the so-called whales, which we also see in the real money gambling world. So there's a lot of similarities between the free-to-play gambling games and real money gambling. The only difference really is the ability to cash out and to win money. Another reason why we're so concerned about these games is that, well, we know that the younger someone starts gambling, the more likely it is that they will develop a problem gambling issue. What we don't know is whether that's also the case for free-to-play gambling games. So some research in that area would be very valuable, I would say. The other question is whether free-to-play gambling games is targeting children and young people. Look, in my opinion, I would say yes. There's other people who disagree with me. But these the free-to-play gambling games are accessed by young people and by children, and they're readily available for them to play. And given the way that they're advertised and marketed, I do believe that young people are accessing those games. Just to give you an example of that, this is a quick screen grab from my Facebook page, and if you go to the games section, this is what comes up, and as you can see, most of those are actually gambling games, free-to-play gambling games. And so it would be the same for anyone looking through their Facebook games page. Look, this again improves accessibility to gambling. It makes gambling becoming a part of your day-to-day life. You know, as you go on social media, you might play a quick game of gambling while you're on there. Normalizes gambling, making it look harmless. And on the side, Facebook has made real money gambling available through Facebook in the UK. So in the UK, you can actually gamble real money through Facebook. This is another screen grab of one of my games. It's called Tiny Car. See down the bottom the advertisement for a poker machine and for Slot 777 app. So it's just another way of gambling infiltrating the video game space. Now, quickly, I want to also point out the odds of winning the top prize and how that's different between the different forms of gambling. If you go to the poker machines, the Pokies venue, and you play Pokies, then your odds are about 1 in 10 million. But if you play on real money websites, so you go to a website to gamble with real money, the odds are actually variable depending on the country that the website is based in. That goes back again to the regulation of the different countries. It's different again if you do the free-to-play gambling games. Your odds are totally unknown. In certain cases, it will be 1-to-1 because every time you pull the trigger, you win something, whether it's a prize or some coins or anything like that. Look, my next slide gives you an example of that. This is another screen grab of one of my games called Fight Back, and you see in the top right corner a poker machine. It's a free spin, so how lucky we are that we get to spin for free. If you click on that, it will open up a poker machine, and every time you play the poker machine, you will actually win something. In this case, it might be coins or a new gun or something like that. So these the odds on these free-to-play gambling games are not regulated at all. And why is that an issue? It's because if you play these games, you might get the impression that the odds are the same in real life. And you might think, because you always win in these games, you might think maybe you will win as well when you gamble with real money. So again, making it accessible to people to have a go, to try it out. Now, I might take a break here and tell you a bit of a personal story about what actually happened to myself not too long ago. Given I'm working and researching in this space, I actually opened up my own iPad and looked at all the games that I downloaded on that. And many of these games are actually played by my kids. I've got a 5 and a 7-year-old. And in looking into all of this, I got quite worried about the content of my own games, and I looked through all of those. And because I don't wish my children to be exposed to all these and this gambling stuff. So turned out that half of my games had some reference to or advertised or incorporated some form of gambling as part of their game. So I deleted all of those. Leading to my next question to you is, it made me really concerned about really how much gambling is available in that space. And so I'd like to know whether you think you have a good idea about the content of all your games, and if you have kids, do you know exactly which games they are playing and what the content of those games are? Now we're moving on to the real video games. So we've dealt with the free-to-play gambling, the simulation gambling, but now we sort of move on to real video games. So what we've seen is that this video game space has been infiltrated, you may say, by the gambling industry. And so video game developers have started working with gambling developers. And so they've learned from each other, and they learn how to engage people in their game and how to hook them onto a game. Now, these principles of gameplay are the exact same principles that keep people hooked, that keep people in the zone. For a video game developer, that might sound like make sure that the flow of gameplay is optimal to keep the player actually playing their games. Now, so all these video games, so there's hundreds and thousands of video games available on the Apple Store or the Google Store, and they're all very good, and most of them are actually free to play as well, with the opportunity to purchase in-app purchases, quite similarly to the gambling apps that we were talking about before. Now, these in-app purchases are often seen as a deceptive way of monetizing the game, and at the moment the European Commission is talking to Apple and Google about this, and looking at how they can make that a little bit more safer for particularly children and young people, but also for families playing these games. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some of these principles that I'm talking about here, and about how they hook people into the game. And I'll do that by giving examples of actual video games. This game is called Puzzle and Dragons, and it features the random reward schedules. Very like many other games feature these reward schedules. Now, what that looks like is you need to feed the rare egg machine. You need to feed him a seed, and then the rare egg machine will actually drop an egg, and then the egg opens up, and that might give you a very rare item or something that's not that valuable. Now, you obviously need to purchase the seed, or you can either purchase that through an in-app purchase, or you can grind to win or to make seeds. And grinding, if you don't know, is doing a series of repetitive tasks in video games, and more than likely some of the previous presentations would have spoken about grinding as well. So the rare egg machine gives out these prizes, these treats, and that happens randomly, and that is a proven way of hooking people in, keeping them playing, and always coming back to this game, to the rare egg machine, to play more. Next up is Dojo Mojo. which is a Zynga game. Zynga, who famously also developed Farmville and has the most popular poker game as well. But Dojo Mojo features losses disguised as wins, where again you have a set of tasks, and to go through the tasks you can either grind away or you can purchase your way, so you don't have to grind through that. A lot of people actually doing that, but purchasing costs you about 8 jade, I think, and after the task you win about 3 jade. So there's an actual loss of 5 jade happening here, with jade being the currency that's used in this game. So the players are losing money, but that is being disguised as a win, because every time they get through the task, that is celebrated as a win. The other thing we see in a lot of video games is have several forms of currency. So, for example, you might have coins and also some gold bars, and the value of those two is different, and you might have to pay or start a certain task with a gold bar, but then get paid. Your win is paid out in coins, and at the end, if you would compare them, your win is actually less than what you had to pay for it in the first place. And then moving on to the queen of video games on mobile phones, obviously this is Candy Crush. It embodies very well all the things we are talking about here. And Candy Crush has been one of the most popular games for a very long time now. I think maybe about three years or so that Candy Crush has been in the top 3 of top grossing games for Apple and Android. I'll open up my poll at this point as well, asking you, have you ever played Candy Crush in your life? Do you know what the game is about? If you play Candy Crush, we see that it's very easy to play, very similar to Pokies. You just go and sit in front of it and it pretty much explains itself. We see an illusion of skill. You may not know, but Candy Crush makes about $700,000 per day. So you have teams working on all the different levels all the time, and all these levels are just scenarios. There's nothing random about how the candy falls or how to get through a level. It is just all pre-organized, if you please. So thinking you have skills in this game is an illusion. They know exactly when you're going to achieve the next level and when not. And if you play the game, then you also remember all the visual and auditory effects that are very similar than gambling, in particular poker is in. So let's move on. We've seen in media quite a few stories about Candy Crush and about its addictive nature. Some saying, I play Candy Crush instead of interacting with my kids. That's completely taken over my life. This has a real impact on people, on families. And again, very, very similar to gambling. I'll tell you a personal story again. Not too long ago, I was shopping for a fridge. I was in the shop, and there was a lady there as well, talking to a salesperson. And I think she was buying a fridge as well. And while she was talking to this salesperson, she was playing Candy Crush. So obviously unable to put down the game for the 5 minutes that she was talking to the salesperson to buy a fridge, which is just crazy, and which is, I guess, evidence of these games being really addictive and really hooking you in. So you see I'm coming back to, Candy Crush not being gambling at all, or not being seen as being gambling. They are, however, as addictive, to say the least, than gambling. This all comes back to the statement that some video games are more addictive than gambling. Now, we're not finished yet. This is not the end of it. I'd like to move on to the next game. Oh, hang on. Which is Clash of Clans. Clash of Clans is a social role-playing game, which is very similar than World of Warcraft. Again, some of the games that you've spoken or you heard about before in the previous presentations. Now, Clash of Clans features all sorts of these gambling principles as well, and makes it social and competitive to play these games. And we hear stories of players actually playing on multiple iPads, and some stories of players taking their iPad, wrapping it in plastic and taking it into the shower to be able to continue to play, spending enormous amounts on this game. This game at the moment is the top grossing game, and it's been so again for longer than a year, and it makes approximately $1 million per day, which is, it means that a lot of people are spending enormous amounts on these games. And so the added ability to make video games really social, really fun, really accepted, and competitive, that you play on social media or just through your mobile phones, is, I think, an added component to the video games, which makes them more addictive. And finally, because we're not finished yet, is the hybrid games. Now, hybrid games are very new. They haven't been developed yet. It's a company has started up based in Australia and claims to find a way to integrate real money gambling into games. So I don't know what that actually looks like, but there's a whole team working on the newest games, which actually incorporates real money gambling. So that's a development that we will see this year, I assume, and which will be very interesting and quite scary at the same time, I guess. Now I wanted to finish off with some parenting tips, although I won't really go into that too much. But really the way I see this space is, just like any other space, there are some concerns and some great opportunity, and I think we need to grab the opportunities and use the benefits of these video games in our education and in our social engagement, because they can be really powerful and very valuable. But I think at the same time, families and young people and children should be aware about the concerns with these video games. And so I think it's quite similar then to the playground. If you take your kids to the playground, then you watch them, especially when they're young, you watch them that they're safe and they don't hurt themselves too much. And when they do, you're right there to care for them. Well, the video game space is very similar to me. It's the playground of the children these days. And as a parent, you need to know where your kids are playing and whether they're safe in that space or not. And if need be, you probably need to monitor them. So my biggest advice to parents is always to know what your kids are playing and then assess yourself whether it's appropriate and whether your kid is able to maneuver through these concerns. Lastly, I think that there's an important education that needs to be done, in particular around this space, but also in general video game addiction. I think young people need to be made aware of these things, and families as well. And I'm hoping to do much more of that into the future.